How does a devoted mother completely vanish from the face of the earth while running a simple, everyday holiday errand? It is a question that has haunted investigators for decades. When a person disappears without a trace, we naturally assume the worst. We look for a crime scene. We look for a suspect. We look for a monster hiding in the shadows. For 24 years, the children of Michele Hundley lived with that exact terror. They believed the worst possible monster had stolen their mother away on a cold December afternoon in 2001. They thought she was a victim. They thought her life had been violently cut short. They spent their youth running search parties, weeping at an empty dinner table every single Christmas, and begging the police for just one shred of physical evidence. But the real mystery of Michele Hundley was not who took her. The real mystery was why she was hiding in plain sight, living an entirely new life under a different name, less than a few hours away. This is not a traditional story of a life stolen by a stranger. This is a deep, chronological analysis of a disappearance that was meticulously planned from the very beginning, and the devastating emotional wake it left behind. If you appreciate deeply researched, factual investigations into the world's most baffling cold cases, please take a brief moment to subscribe to the channel. Your support allows us to continue analyzing these stories with the depth and respect they deserve. Now, let us go back to the year 2001, to the quiet town where the silence first began. The date was December 2001. In the quiet community of Eden, North Carolina, the holiday season was in full swing. Families were decorating their homes, local shops were bustling, and 38-year-old Michele Hundley Smith was seemingly preparing for a normal Christmas with her 3 children. By all accounts from those who knew her at the time, Michele was a typical, dedicated mother. Neighbors saw her as someone deeply involved in her children's lives. Her family was her anchor. On that specific December afternoon, Michele told her family she was heading out to do some last-minute Christmas shopping. It was a chore millions of parents do every single year. She grabbed her car keys, said goodbye, and walked out the front door. She never returned. When night fell and the hours began to stretch, panic set in. It was entirely uncharacteristic of Michele to stay out late without calling, especially with her children waiting for her at home. Her family contacted the local authorities, their voices filled with growing dread. Within hours, local law enforcement launched a full-scale missing persons investigation. Detectives immediately began retracing her steps. They mapped out the routes she would have taken to the local shopping centers in Eden and neighboring towns. They checked with local businesses, hoping a cashier or a security camera had captured her face. Then, just a short time into the search, investigators caught their first major break. They found her vehicle, but the vehicle brought more questions than answers. The car was discovered abandoned on the side of a road. Detectives approached the vehicle with their flashlights drawn, bracing themselves for a horrific scene. But when they shined their lights through the glass, they found nothing. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken windows, no forced entry, no blood. However, what was missing was highly telling. Michele's purse, her identification, and all of her personal belongings were completely gone. Investigators immediately requested her phone records and financial data. In December of 2001, digital tracking was in its infancy, but it was still a critical tool. The results were chilling. Her cell phone showed absolute silence. Her bank accounts, which should have been active with holiday purchases, went completely dark. No one had withdrawn a single dollar. For investigators, this lack of evidence was deeply alarming. Without a digital footprint, without a crime scene, and without any witnesses, the investigation ground to a sudden, frustrating halt. Michele Hundley had simply dissolved into the cold winter air, leaving behind an empty car and a shattered family. As weeks turned into months, and months turned into years, the silence from Michele grew heavier. The local media attention slowly faded away, replaced by newer headlines. But inside Michele's home, time had stopped. Her 3 children were left to navigate the most critical years of their lives, their teenage years and early adulthood, with a profound, aching void. Every major life milestone was overshadowed by her absence. Graduations, weddings, the births of her grandchildren. All of these beautiful moments were accompanied by a painful question mark. What happened to Mom? Was she suffering? Was she resting somewhere in an unmarked grave? Every single Christmas, an empty chair sat at their dinner table, a physical reminder of the day she went shopping and never came back. Despite the lack of progress from the police, her children absolutely refused to let the world forget her. They became her fiercest advocates. They launched missing persons pages online, kept her face circulating on social media, and printed hundreds of flyers. They constantly reached out to local detectives, pleading with them to look at the file with fresh eyes, hoping that perhaps new forensic technology could unlock the mystery. Over the next 2 decades, law enforcement agencies across the United States would routinely discover unidentified human remains. This is one of the quiet horrors of being the family of a missing person. Every time a Jane Doe fitting Michelle's general description was found anywhere in North Carolina or the surrounding states, her children's hearts would stop. They would hold their breath, waiting for the phone to ring. They prepared themselves mentally for a call from the medical examiner. They braced themselves for the grim, painful confirmation that their mother's life had met a tragic, violent end. But for 24 years, that call never came. By the time the 2020s arrived, more than 2 decades had passed since that fateful December afternoon. The case files in the police department were thick, covered in dust, and officially categorized as a cold case. The community had moved on. Most investigators who originally worked the case had retired. The general consensus among locals was that Michele had been the victim of a random, fatal encounter, and that whoever was responsible had successfully hidden the truth forever. The family was forced to learn to live with a devastating reality. They might go to their graves without ever knowing what happened to their mother. But a new team of investigators was about to look somewhere no one had ever thought to look before. In the mid-2020s, a specialized cold case unit took over the file of Michele Hundley Smith. These detectives were detached from the original emotion of the 2001 investigation, allowing them to look at the facts with complete objectivity. Furthermore, they were armed with advanced digital forensic tools and national databases that simply did not exist when Michele first vanished. The investigators made a strategic decision. Instead of searching local woods, looking through old cemetery records, or comparing DNA to unidentified bodies, they decided to look at modern, active government databases across state lines. They were searching for anomalies, unusual activity tied to social security numbers, or names that shared background details with Michele's extended family history. During a routine, highly detailed cross-reference check of state records, an investigator noticed a minor detail that did not make sense. A woman was living in another part of North Carolina. She possessed an active, valid driver's license. She paid taxes. She rented property. She lived a quiet, completely normal suburban life. But when investigators looked deeper into her public records and legal history, her past seemed to begin out of nowhere, right around the year 2002. There was no digital or financial footprint for this woman prior to the months following Michele's disappearance. Detectives quietly traveled to the town where this woman resided. They did not rush in. They conducted surveillance, observing her from a distance as she went about her day. She looked older, of course. Time had changed her features, but the underlying facial structure, the posture, and the eyes were unmistakable. The detectives climbed the steps of the porch and knocked firmly on the front door. When the door opened, a woman answered. The investigators introduced themselves, stated they were from the cold case unit, and asked her for her true identity. She did not deny it. She did not run. She did not panic. The woman looked at the detectives and calmly confirmed what they already suspected. She was, in fact, Michele Hundley. She was alive. She was perfectly healthy. And she had been living less than a few hours away from the very home and the very children she had abandoned 24 years earlier. The hidden truth was finally out. This was not a case of abduction, foul play, or tragedy. It was a case of deliberate, calculated deletion. Michele had not been taken by force. On that afternoon in December 2001, she made a conscious, sober choice to walk away from her life. She used the story of a Christmas shopping trip as a head start. She drove her car to a specific location, left it as a total distraction to mislead the police, walked away, and completely erased her identity. Without using standard banking or traditional identification that would trigger alerts, she managed to live an entirely under-the-radar life for nearly a quarter of a century. She built a completely new existence, entirely unburdened by the family she left behind. When questioned by authorities, she offered no grand excuse. There was no dramatic criminal secret. She had simply wanted to start over. And to achieve that new beginning, she allowed her own children to mourn her as dead for over 2 decades. When law enforcement finally contacted Michele's adult children to deliver the news, it was a moment that completely defied human comprehension. For over 2 decades, they had prayed for an answer. They had begged the universe to tell them where their mother was. But true crime investigations often remind us of a harsh truth. Answers do not always bring peace, and closure can sometimes be sharper than the mystery itself. Finding out a parent was taken by a violent criminal brings a profound, tragic grief. But it is a grief accompanied by the knowledge that your parent loved you and would have come home if they could. But finding out a parent looked at your face, walked out the door, and chose to let you live a nightmare for 24 years brings an entirely different kind of psychological trauma. It is a quiet, deeply cutting betrayal that shatters your perception of the past. Her children were left to process the agonizing realization that their decades of tears, their missing persons pages, and their broken hearts were all spent mourning someone who simply chose a life that did not include them. This case forces us to look at the true, complex nature of missing persons investigations. As true crime followers, we often brace ourselves to face the dark monsters that lurk in the shadows of society. But sometimes the most terrifying reality to accept is the mystery of human choice and the capacity of someone we love to simply turn around, walk away, and never look back. Michele Hundley's children finally got the truth they searched for, but it was a truth that carried an incredibly heavy weight. If you were in the position of her children, could you ever find it in your heart to understand her choice? Or is some emotional damage simply too deep to ever repair? Let us know your thoughts and perspectives in the comments below. We read every single one. Thank you for spending your time with us today. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel to support our independent investigations. We will see you in the next case.